It is September 1944, and the Third Reich is on the brink of collapse. Allied forces have swept from the Normandy beaches through France and into Belgium, liberating Paris amid wild celebrations. The German armies reeled backward in disarray, abandoning equipment and prisoners in their wake. In London and New York, optimism surges. People whisper that victory might come by Christmas, that the long nightmare of war could end with soldiers home for the holidays. Yet at Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force in France, the mood is far darker. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the Supreme Commander, stares at maps revealing a grim reality. His advancing armies are grinding to a halt, starved of fuel and supplies. The Great Offensive has outrun its logistics, and now two of the alliance's most powerful leaders, Eisenhower and his senior British subordinate, Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, are locked in a bitter clash of wills, egos, and strategies that threatens to fracture the coalition. Eisenhower, the Kansas-born soldier with a disarming smile and a legendary temper, excels not in battlefield brilliance but in coalition diplomacy, managing prickly generals and fragile alliances while chain-smoking through endless nights. He bears the crushing responsibility of the Western Front, haunted by the fear of failure. Montgomery, the ascetic victor of El Alamein, is a stark contrast. Disciplined, teetotal, Bible reading, and utterly self-assured, he views Eisenhower as amiable but strategically naive, dismissing the American broad front, advance pushing all armies forward together as a butter-knife approach, spread too thin to cut deeply anywhere. Montgomery demands a single, concentrated thrust under his command, a dagger aimed straight at the Ruhr industrial heartland and beyond, to Berlin. On September 10th, in Brussels, Eisenhower arrives by plane, hampered by a painful knee injury that keeps him seated aboard. Montgomery boards, skips formalities, clears the cabin of staff, and unleashes a tirade waving reports of V-2 rockets pounding London. Blaming Eisenhower's strategy for the mounting crisis, Eisenhower's face flushes with fury. Gripping his armrests, he interrupts sharply. "Steady there, Monty. You cannot talk to me like that. I'm your boss." The cabin falls silent. Montgomery, realizing he's overstepped, apologizes quietly. Then he presses his advantage, grant him priority in supplies, fuel, and the 1st Allied Airborne Army. Halt advances elsewhere, and he promises a swift path to Berlin. Eisenhower hesitates. He knows the risks a narrow thrust leaves flanks exposed, vulnerable to counterattacks. Proper logistics demand pausing to secure the massive port of Antwerp, captured intact just days earlier on September 4th, whose docks and cranes stand ready to flood the front with supplies. But the Scheldt estuary remains in German hands, blocking access. Still, political pressures weigh heavily. Britain's war-weary public endures relentless 5-2 attacks and craves a decisive win. Against his instincts, Eisenhower relents. He approves Montgomery's plan. Operation Market Garden, history's largest airborne assault. Over 35,000 paratroopers from the American 101st and 82nd Airborne Divisions, the British 1st Airborne, and Polish brigades will drop behind enemy lines to seize a chain of 9 bridges, laying a carpet for British armor to race 60 miles up a single road to the Rhine at Arnhem. September 17th dawns clear over Holland. The sky darkens with thousands of aircraft and gliders, a breathtaking spectacle. Initial drops succeed. Bridges fall quickly into Allied hands. For a fleeting moment, it seems Montgomery's bold vision might triumph. But cracks appear almost immediately. At Arnhem, the British 1st Airborne lands miles from the vital bridge, losing surprise. Radios fail in the wooded terrain. Worst of all, intelligence warnings of refitting German panzer divisions nearby dismissed by Montgomery's planners, proven tragically accurate. 2 battle-hardened SS Panzer units await, turning the area into a killing ground. For 9 brutal days, the lightly armed British paratroopers dubbed the Red Devils hold a shrinking perimeter around Oosterbeek and Arnhem against overwhelming odds. Down the narrow Hell's Highway, British the 30th Corps grinds forward, delayed by fierce resistance, destroyed vehicles blocking roads, and cautious advances. American paratroopers at Nijmegen heroically seize their bridge after savage fighting, even paddling across the Vaal River in canvas boats under murderous fire. They hold, awaiting relief that arrives too late. Delays mount, the final push to Arnhem falters. On September 25th, withdrawal orders come. The remnants of the 1st Airborne evacuate across the Rhine under cover of darkness. Of 10,000 British airborne troops committed at Arnhem, only about 2,400 escape. Thousands lie dead, wounded, or captured. Total Allied casualties exceed 17,000 more than on D-Day itself. Montgomery, undeterred, declares the operation 90% successful in a press conference, praising it as a bold stroke. Eisenhower seethes privately. To him, it is a catastrophic gamble that squandered lives and precious resources. Compounding the disaster, Montgomery had neglected Eisenhower's explicit orders to prioritize clearing the Scheldt estuary. While forces bled in Holland, the German 15th Army fortified the approaches to Antwerp, mining waters and digging in. The port fiddle for sustaining any further advance remains useless. By October, Allied momentum stalls completely. Patton's Third Army runs dry of fuel in the south. Ammunition shortages cripple operations everywhere. Eisenhower, furious at the lost opportunity to end the war in 1944, drafts a scorching message to Montgomery, demanding immediate action on Antwerp or face consequences bordering on insubordination. Montgomery complies, reluctantly, but the delay proves fatal. Clearing the Scheldt becomes a grueling campaign, fought mainly by Canadian and British forces in flooded fortified terrain. It drags into November, costing over 12,000 casualties. Antwerp finally opens on November 28, too late to exploit the autumn window. Winter descends. In December, Hitler launches his desperate Ardennes offensive, the Battle of the Bulge, smashing through thin American lines in a surprise attack. Eisenhower reacts swiftly, temporarily placing 2 U.S. armies under Montgomery's command on the northern shoulder to contain the Bulge, while Patton counterattacks from the south. Montgomery performs competently, holding firmly with characteristic caution. But as the crisis ebbs in early January 1945, he calls a press conference, portraying the American forces as caught off guard and disorganized. He implies his steady hand alone averted disaster, barely acknowledging the fierce resistance of U.S. troops at places like Bastogne. American commanders erupt in outrage. Bradley feels humiliated. Patton fumes. Eisenhower, pushed to the brink, drafts an ultimatum to the combined chiefs of staff. The alliance cannot endure Montgomery's divisiveness. One of them must go. He prepares to relieve Britain's most celebrated general, risking political upheaval. Montgomery's chief of staff, the diplomatic Francis de Gingand, intervenes urgently, rushing through blizzards to warn his boss. Shocked, Montgomery pens a humble apology, reaffirming loyalty and subordination. Eisenhower, valuing coalition unity above personal grievance, accepts it and destroys the dismissal draft. The crisis passes. The war grinds on to victory in May 1945, yet the scars linger. Eisenhower and Montgomery never fully reconcile. Trust erodes permanently. In the dim glow of his trailer headquarters at SHAEF, far from the front lines where the mud of the Scheldt still clung to Canadian boots and the snow of the Ardennes chilled American graves, Dwight D. Eisenhower sat alone with his thoughts. The war was won, Hitler defeated, but the ghosts of autumn 1944 lingered like cigarette smoke in the air over 17,000 Allied casualties in Operation Market Garden, where brave paratroopers of the British 1st Airborne, the U.S. 101st and 82nd, and Polish brigades dropped into Dutch fields expecting light resistance, only to face the refitted fury of 2 SS Panzer divisions, the 9th and 10th, hidden in plain sight under ignored intelligence reports. At Arnhem alone, of the 10,000 British and Polish airborne troops committed, 1,485 lay dead, 6,525 captured, their Red Devils barretts scattered amid the ruins of Oosterbeek perimeter, holding for 9 hellish days against 88mm guns and Panther tanks while the 30th Corps crawled up Hell's highway, delayed by single destroyed trucks on narrow causeways, cautious halts for tea and nightfall, and flanks gnawed by German counterattacks. Eisenhower's mind replayed the penciled maps. The dagger thrust Montgomery demanded on that 10th September 10th aboard the B-25 in Brussels priority fuel, ammo, the entire 1st Allied Airborne Army, halting Patton's rampaging Third Army in the south. Ike had relented, swayed by V-2 rockets terrorizing London. Britain's plea for a knockout blow, whispering promises of Berlin by Christmas. But the thrust snapped. Radios silent in Arnhem's woods, gliders landing miles off target, British tanks at Nijmegen waiting for infantry while US 82nd paratroopers paddled canvas boats across the Vaal River under withering fire from MG-42s, seizing the bridge in blood, only for relief to falter. Montgomery's post-failure press conference rang hollow, 90% successful. A very good show, ignoring the shattered division evacuating 2,400 survivors across the Rhine under moonless skies, leaving 8,000 brothers behind in German hands. Worse still, the Supreme Commander's explicit order, clear the Scheldt. Open Antwerp, nothing else matters, went unheeded. Captured intact on September 4th by the British 11th Armored, Antwerp's vast docks and cranes, Europe's second-largest port, mocked the Allies from 55 miles inland, its estuary banks held by 65,000 escaping. Germans of the 15th Army ferried north in commandeered barges while Montgomery chased Ruhr glory. By October, Patton idled without gas, Bradley short shells. The entire front starved in Normandy beaches 400 miles rearward, Red Ball Express trucks burning fuel faster than they delivered. Eisenhower's cable scorched, not command disputes, but your ability and willingness to obey orders. Sack him. The ultimatum hovered. October 15th deadline. As Admiral Ramsey thundered to SHAEF, that Antwerp was as much use as Timbuktu without the estuary. Only then, chastened, did Montgomery pivot, assigning 1st Canadian Army under Guy Simons. But delay bred disaster, flooded polders, Walcheren Island bunkers, dike-busting RAF bombs flooding German forts, Savage fights at Breskens and South Beveland. Over 12,873 casualties, 6,367 Canadian, 41,043 Germans captured. Antwerp, operational November 28, 6 weeks too late for 1944's golden window. Churchill later admitted, clearing the Scheldt was delayed for Arnhem. Winter's jaws snapped shut with Hitler's Ardennes gamble. December 16, the Bulge bulging 50 miles through thin U.S. lines. Intelligence lulled by overconfidence. Eisenhower's verdict, tactical necessity placed 1st and 9th U.S. Armies under Montgomery's northern shoulder, splitting Bradley's 12th Army Group along the Meuse-Fourcombes lines. American egos boiled. Patton, apoplectic. Bradley humiliated, but Ike swallowed pride. Monty cautious, holding while Patton's third wheeled north in miracle 48-tower pivot, relieving Bastones, nuts, defenders. Victory ebbed by New Year's. Then, January 7th, in Zonhoven, Montgomery's fatal hubris. Strutting before 200 reporters. I, not we, sorted the interesting little operational problem. Americans run hither and thither in a state of chaos. His steady-hand savior, Bastogne bravery, a footnote. U.S. High Command detonated. Bradley resignation drafted. Patton cursing, cables flying to Marshall. Eisenhower, chain-smoking, camels, till his hand trembled. Typed the unsent thunderbolt to combined chiefs. The situation has become impossible. It is him or me. I can no longer command this man. Bedell Smith prepped the cable. DeGingen braved snowstorms, slamming Monty's desk. Ike's firing UN conditional apology or done. Pale. Monty penned desperation. I am your devoted subordinate. I will do whatever you say. Ike tore the draft. Alliance salvaged but poisoned. Those lost haunted Ike. 17,000 in Market Gardens. Silk carpet failure. 12,873 in Scheldt's mud. Canadians drowning in flooded trenches. Poles storming Walcheren under naval guns. 81,000 Americans in the Bulges. Snow. 19,000 dead at Bastogne, St. Vith, Elsenborn, where 106th Infantry surrendered en masse. Yet the 9th Corps plugged the gap. Ego, not enemy, cost them. Monty's infallibility, dismissing Butterknife broad front for single thrust. Ike's coalition, calculus yielding once too often. Yet he chose unity, preserving the fragile Anglo-American bond that crushed the Reich, over personal fury or British backlash that might topple Churchill. Victory, May 8, 1945. Monty, his VE parade. Ike, the White House. But trust, shattered. Postor, Montgomery's 1958 memoirs, stabbed anew. Eisenhower was the boss. But no soldier prompting Ike's venom to Cornelius Ryan. He's a psychopath. Don't forget that. Egocentric, can't see the other side. No more contact. The 1952 portrait Ike painted to my friend Monty. Ike, bitter irony. In Abilene Reflections or Gettysburg Farm Rides, Eisenhower pondered the DID in case of failure note, humbly accepting blame alone. Here, blame fit Monty, squandered airborne elites, idle Antwerp, fueling Bulge, reinforcements, 9 wasted months to Rhine crossings. The unsent letters ink never dried in archives, but its echo endures a spectral ultimatum whispering what nearly was, fratricide in high command. Alliance rent, asunder mid-victory. It reminds that war's cruelest blades are sometimes allies' egos, sharpened by national pride yet Ike's forbearance. Prioritizing free world's triumph over vengeance, forged the coalition hammer that smashed Nazism. The boys didn't come home by Christmas 44. 400,000 more died continent-wide, but spring 45 saw flags over Berlin, because one Kansan farm boy glued the brotherhood when it teetered on abyss, betting house on unity over the dagger's gamble. History's verdict, Ike's broad front plotted to win. Monty's thrust flickered out. The hardest battles, not panzers in mist, but memos and fogware victories. Price was swallowing the scream. You ruined everything.